Hey folks, welcome back to my channel. It's been a week. Oh my goodness. So after last week and the disappointment of the lockdown being extended to the end of May and no change there, we actually had an update which allowed us to go out and meet with I think it's one or two, I can't remember the laws, but basically can't be in groups of more than 6 people outdoors at any one time. But it does mean that you can meet with people outside of your own household, which has been amazing. So we met up with a couple of friends through the week here and there, just to go for walks and stuff like that and socialize and see people that are outside of our house that we haven't seen for like well over 2 months. So that was good and definitely came at a time when it was needed. And of course we followed all the rules in terms of social distancing and all that stuff. So yeah, it's been great. But this week I thought I would share a video of, well, I say a video, I didn't intend to film this when we went away to South Africa at the beginning of March, right when all the corona stuff was kicking off. And it was one of those things where before we went, it was like touch and go. We were like, should we go, shouldn't we go? This thing seems to be heating up, don't know exactly what's going to happen. Didn't even comprehend or think that we would get something to the extent that we have had. Before South Africa, we were like, well, it might just get a bit hectic and may mean that flights and stuff are delayed and make the travel and stuff a bit more stressful than it usually is. But we thought, hey, we'll just head over, and I'll explain more later. But yeah, it was what it was. But at that point I was so flat out, shot so many weddings in the last like 18 months, had so much in my editing queue for the wedding business that I just wasn't even in the frame of mind of filming vlogs and stuff like that. So this video is very different, which you'll have already gathered by the fact that it's cropped to a square. But I hope you enjoy it anyway, and it's captured some very special memories for us, and I talk through a little bit about what it meant and everything and the context of it. So yeah, hope you enjoy. I hope you're well, look after yourselves, and thanks for watching. A lot of you may or may not know, but the reason why I have such a strange accent is that I was actually born in Zimbabwe and I grew up there until I was 13 years old. You also may or may not know much of the history of Zimbabwe, but to save you a huge history lesson, because it would be pretty big, like many African countries, it's gone through some immense hardship, and a lot of that hardship has actually just been in the last 30 years, and some of the hardest years that the country has faced has probably been in the last maybe 10 years or so. Pretty crazy what the country has been through, but my family and I lived through the start of when things started to get bad, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was tough then when we were there, and ultimately that's what led to the decision that my parents made to leave and immigrate to the UK and start a new life there. But the saddest thing for Zimbabwe is that it's never gotten better. It's only gotten worse from that first day and from those first few years that we were living through that, and even to this day it still hasn't gotten any better. And it's one of these things where, can it possibly even get any worse? And it does. So yeah, it's very sad. All that is to say that this trip back to South Africa, and just to clarify, Zimbabwe and South Africa are 2 different countries. It's like Ireland and England, different countries, different presidents, all that sort of stuff, just in case you're wondering, not the same. You see, the context of the 2 different countries, Zimbabwe and South Africa, is that my mom grew up in Zimbabwe, and that's where my grandparents on my mom's side lived. My dad is South African, was born there, and that's where he grew up, and that's where my dad's parents, my grandparents, live. And so when my parents got married, my dad moved up to Zimbabwe, and that's where my parents lived, and that's where I was born. And that's the context of how I landed up in Zimbabwe and why I'm now going to South Africa. So all of my family, even extended family, great aunts and uncles, everybody that I'm related to that used to live in Zimbabwe has since left because of what's going on there and the situation. I still go back to South Africa as often as I can, which is not that often, but I try and go back as much as I can just to see family there, see my grandparents, and experience a bit of the lifestyle that I had when I was a kid growing up. We used to go down to South Africa pretty often, probably at least once a year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like 1,000 kilometers. And back then, it sounds crazy, I feel old saying this, but back then there weren't just easy commercial flights that you could just hop on a flight like you do these days and fly down. It's like that now, but when I was a kid it just didn't really happen. Like it was the elite, really. Super rich or government people would fly to South Africa, and there'd be like one flight a day or a couple of flights a week type thing, not like several flights a day. So we used to drive to South Africa. It used to take an entire day to drive from where we lived in Zimbabwe to the farm, to the ranch that we were staying on now with my aunt and uncle, to visit my grandparents. So that's a bit of context as to the difference between the two countries. So I was born in Zimbabwe, grew up there, and although they're different countries, they are fairly similar. There's a lot of similarities. They have similar animals, the weather's similar, etc., etc. But this trip was to see my grandparents in South Africa, where I've never actually lived, but I've visited a lot because of family. So, rabbit trail, but that's the context. This trip back served two purposes for us. One was to reconnect with family, especially with my grandparents, who I see very rarely, probably once every 2 to 3 years at the moment, just with the way life is and stuff like that. And they're getting old. My grandfather will be 94 this October, so it was important to reconnect with them and for them to spend a bit of time with my kids and stuff like that. And the second thing is that I wanted to show my kids just a taste of the type of life that I had at their age and the type of stuff that I did and got to experience, which is completely foreign to the life that they're living right now. But I thought it would be super cool for them to get to see it. And yes, I know they're very young, and we should probably be doing this when they're like 6, 7, 8 years old, and they might actually remember some of it. But it's important to see my grandparents and for them to see that kind of life that I grew up with. Thanks to the weather in Africa and the fact that it's one of the most beautiful places on earth, when you live there, you tend to do a lot outdoors, or at least we did, and pretty much my entire family, all my extended family did as well. We camped, we hunted, we fished, we hiked, rode bikes, rode motorbikes, quad bikes, 4x4, we swam loads. My grandfather on my mom's side used to keep livestock that we would slaughter. As kids, we would go and help him when he slaughtered these animals, and we'd help him butcher them, and he would take everything and use everything from these animals. And when I say everything, I mean like if it was a pig, he'd use the feet, and or like you probably don't even want to know what he ate. But he grew up in the Second World War with very little and great poverty, and so he just learned to make use of everything that he had. He didn't waste anything. He kept cattle that would be milked every day. So that's the kind of life that I grew up with, and the lifestyle that I had when I was small. And right from when I was as young as I can remember, these are the type of things that were going on around me, that I was experiencing, etc. So hopefully now that makes a bit more sense to you as to the type of culture shock that I had when we moved to the UK, and my family of 6 lived in a little terrace house in the middle of town and didn't have all of the stuff that I'd grown up with, and it was such a different life. But I think I'll probably make another video about that sometime, but I won't go into the detail right now. But yeah, it was interesting to say the least. But anyway, our trip to South Africa was super special. It was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. We stayed with my aunt and uncle in their safari lodge, which was so good. It's beautiful there. The building was actually built by our family, so my other uncle that lives in the USA, he built it, and that was their house while they were there. But we reconnected with family. We spent a lot of time with my grandparents. We visited them at their house and ate fish and chips on their veranda, fished with them a bunch. My grandfather is an avid fisherman. He absolutely loves fishing. It was total bliss, memories that I'll cherish forever. We went on lots of game drives. Now, game drive is when you drive a 4x4 around a ranch and you look for animals. So like wild animals, antelope, giraffe, all that sort of stuff. And Jack's got to see loads of animals that most kids don't even know exist or even know what they are. And Jax can name them, and he got to see them like within 10 meters, 20 meters from the car. It was epic. He loved it. We ate all sorts of local food that I grew up eating, like biltong, which is like jerky, some dried meat, and Jax absolutely loves it. Like, he's just ravenous for biltong. It's so funny. Him and Liliana saw a cow being milked by hand for the first time. So my aunt and uncle have a few dairy cows, I think maybe 5 or 10, somewhere around there, and they have these cattle milked every single day. They have staff that work for them, and these guys milk the cows every day, and that's the milk that's used for the lodge and in the house and in the kitchen and all that sort of stuff. So it's pretty cool, very self-subsistence in that way. We found a snake in the house. It was actually in like the potato bag in the kitchen, so some of the kitchen staff absolutely freaked out when they found it, and my uncle caught it and we got to look at it a little bit. Yeah, it was pretty cool to see, and pretty cool for Jax and Liliana to experience as well. But just a PS, don't try that at home. Don't try and catch snakes. Africa has some of the most poisonous snakes in the world. I say at home, I don't know why I even said that, because if you're watching this and you live in the UK, then the chance of you finding a snake in your potato bag in your kitchen is very slim. But if you ever happen to be in Africa and you have a snake in your potato bag, don't try and catch it, because it's probably poisonous, and Africa has some of the most poisonous snakes in the world, so you don't want to get bit, my friend. I am very grateful for the memories that we have from this trip. It was very special. The time with family and with my grandparents was so special. Them getting to know our kids a little bit more. Jax absolutely loved it, just absolutely thrived. And yeah, even with the trip getting a bit stressful towards the back end, so we were there in March, pretty much the first 2 weeks of March, so we were due to come back around mid-March of this year. As everyone knows, we're in the middle of this sucky situation, and things were starting to heat up a little bit. We weren't sure how easy it was going to be to get back, and they hadn't implemented travel restrictions yet, but it was still a little bit tricky, and we were like, what does this even look like? Are they going to let us on the plane? Are they going to let us back in the country? All that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was a bit hectic, but as it turned out, the trip back was actually one of my best travel experiences of my entire life. All the airports involved, including Heathrow, were dead quiet. I've never seen them like that, and it was a really easy, cruisy trip. Just one note, if you have watched this and you're interested in going to Africa, I'll put Mark and Lisa, that's my aunt and uncle, I'll put their details in the description down below, and you should hit them up and get chatting. They have a lot of experience. They've been running a game lodge for 20 years, so they know what they're doing, and their place is awesome. I'd highly recommend getting to Africa. It's incredible. It's one of those things you can't just go once. I'm pretty sure everyone that goes to Africa wants to go again and starts making plans for it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Last early morning, wake up with this one. And then Ruskin coffee outside. And it's her special day. She's 1 today. Oopsies, Lily. Is your Rusk yummy, Liliana? Lily? Is your Rusk yummy?